Welcome to the Scottish Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host Chris, and here we'll be delving into a multitude of strange occurrences that happen within Scotland and beyond. You can contact us with your accounts at the Scottish Paranormal Podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on all social media channels, and you can contact us by either means.
Okay, I was just saying, I was trying to get rid of a light there, just in my back of my head. It was making me look like just shiny.
yeah, I can see that.
Couple of UFOs in the background. I need to do something about these lights.
Right, listen, they look interesting, actually.
Listen, so thanks for coming on the show. Looking forward to.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Looking forward to talk to you. I mean, I first heard of you on, as I said to you, via the chat and stuff before we had a wee while back. And I was listening to the Penny Royale podcast, and I did find all your insights quite interesting, and all the kind of knowledge you had in it. And I did think I need to talk to this guy one day. That's when we kind of contacted on Twitter and stuff like that as well. And yeah, so pretty good. So thanks.
It's interesting because there's always like this line, like, how do you get to know people? Because the guys in Penny Royal found me because I was actually doing things for the New Kirks, like, Greg and Dana. Like I did, they invited me at the height of the pandemic, was September 2020, to do a talk about Hellier, which is the thing they've done, of course, and Thelema, because during the pandemic I wrote a series of articles on Reddit of all places, and they were interested in hearing more, pretty much. And so we became friends. I did this thing, and then of course Nathan was there, and then we became friends, and we did all the Penny Royal thing, season 1, season 2. There's gonna be season 3 as well. It's crazy how much stuff they keep uncovering. Somerset, Kentucky really is a weird place. I tell you that.
That's like a really good podcast as well. I've had Nathan on the show as well. A good chat to him as well. It's a really good podcast.
It's fantastic. You would see, season 3. He's writing it now. He's writing the book out of everything as well, by the way. And it's the thing is that no matter how long is the Penny Royal, it's quite a long listen if you go from the beginning to the end. Yeah. It's still like, I would say it's like 5% of the things they've told me, and 5% of the things that you could tell about. It's insanity. I never visited Somerset. I've been in the US many times before the pandemic, but I definitely would like to go and maybe see for myself what it feels to be there. It definitely feels a weird place, right? So.
Interesting fact, where the Appalachian mountain range that runs through there at one point did go through Scotland and right through kind of that part of Europe, right across.
Something I remember that. Yeah, so basically, some of the weirdness comes up to your mountains as well, I suppose.
Totally.
The Great Boundary Fault.
It's the Great Boundary Fault. Is that what you said, Mark? Yeah. One of the faults, the one that runs right up into it's the Upper Highlands, that one it goes right up to the Cairngorms and stuff like that. And we'll talk about that later because it kind of ties into some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. Of
course.
So listen, I'll just kind of invite you in as well. Let me have a wee chat here. But this is Marco Visconti, lifelong student of Western Esoteric Practices. Do you want to just tell us a wee bit about yourself?
Of course. That's my name. I've been interested at first, and then a practicing magician for, I would say, most of my life. I found out about these practices when I was in my early teens, and I dabbled with it during the teens. This was the 90s, right? Between literally the entire decade of the 90s, I was dabbling with it, and then by the tail end of it, I sought out initiation in what is called the AA or Argentum Astrum, which is one of Aleister Crowley's orders. I guess we'll talk about it later. And then in time, I joined a bunch of other things, as you usually do. It's very easy if you're interested in one group, in one practice. It's very easy to branch out. I mean, that, like I said, that was like the late 90s, 25 odd years later. Here I am. I've been, in more recent years, I've been involved, very much involved in OTO, or Ordo Templi Orientis, which was yet another order that was, it wasn't created, but it was restructured and then expanded by Aleister Crowley. I quit. I left the OTO in 2018. Which is now already 5 years ago. It's almost 5 years ago. It's weird. It's weird about thinking about time with all the COVID stuff that happened recently. But yeah, that's because I found a lot of things that I didn't want to be involved with. From rape allegations that maybe weren't allegations at all, to connections with the alt-right, the far-right, all the entire spectrum. And I was like, this is not for me. I mean, or rather, I really like the OTO system of what you do there, and a little spoilers from maybe later. It's sort of a more magical Freemasonry. I'm in Freemasonry as well. The classic Freemasonry you can join everywhere in the UK and all over the world really. But the OTO is Freemasonry, but with magic and with Thelema, with Aleister Crowley in it. So I was really into it. So the system itself, I still like it. I don't like the people that run it, both here in the UK and worldwide. So that's why I left. And, from that point onward, I went on and did my own thing. I reactivated one branch of the many Thelemic Gnostic churches that are out there called Ecclesia Gnostica Universalis, which I've been working with a very selected few. That's an ongoing work. It's not so much a public work. Like you can join the website. Yeah, you can wait, go on the website, read what we are, what we do. But it's not really like an open doors order. It's not like, for instance, the OTO, where you can just send an application, say, hey, I would like to join. Since I found out that doesn't work. Like you really need to know the person first for a long time before deciding if you want to invite them for dinner. Let's put it like that, right? So that's what we're doing there. We might start doing more open things. That was our original plan, but as you know, COVID happened, and for the last 2 years and a half, we've been like working on ourselves. And another thing that I've been doing, during the lockdowns, I started organizing an online magical community called Magic Without Tears, which is in fact a reference to the latest series of letters that then went organized in a book by Aleister Crowley, called Magic Without Tears, which in itself, of course, it's a reference of mathematics without tears. It's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke there. And Magic Without Tears, it's something that has been growing steadily. It began way bigger beast than I thought it would be. At the very beginning, we were like maybe 20 people together, trying to make sense of the lockdown times, using Zoom as the first time we were using Zoom, right? Over the course of the pandemic, we ended up having hundreds and hundreds of people coming in and out. At the highest, we had 200. Almost over 200, 200 something, members all at once. And then, of course, the world reopened. People don't want to be on Zoom anymore. People want to go out at the pub or just have a nice, real holiday. And now, I guess we're around 100 people. But the good thing is that it's very engaged, and it's been a very good experience in the sense that, as I mentioned at the beginning, I've been involved in lodges and groups and covens most of my life. And I know that a lot of people that have never been into one of these groups might have a very, almost like rose-tinted glasses idea what it's like. But usually it's very few people with 2 or 3 that do all the work, and the other people come along for the ride. And that's it. It's always something very small. Right. Even in the OTO in London, where I live, the Ameth Lodge of the OTO is named to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest lodge in the world. And when I was a treasurer of the lodge, and like I said, I quit in 2018, so I don't know what it's like right now. But at the time, I had on my my members' rolls 93 members, which is kind of a funny number because 93 is an important number for them. Of those 93 people, you would see maybe 20, and that's it, right? Whereby, of course, the idea of having a magical community, it's maybe less of a commitment because you join, you just switch your computer on, you can be in your pajamas, you just have to engage, right? But all the members that we have, they're all engaged, and that means that you can do a lot of things. So we run a lot of experiments and scrying sessions, and I put together let's say one Magic 101, Magic 201 course where literally people that never had any experience in practical magic could join, and they did. And by the end of it, which is usually around for like 3 months, they would have a solid understanding of what they need to do magic. What is magic? How do you do it? Also, maybe dissipating a lot of ideas that people have about magic. It's not Harry Potter, right? It's not Dungeons and Dragons either. Maybe some Dungeons and Dragons things you can have at the same time. Maybe not the firebolts, unfortunately, because we live in a very mundane world. But you can have other kind of experiences, like invoking and evoking spirits of various kinds. So the thing is that the magical community really showed me that there's still a lot of people out there that really, really engage. And I would say, and then maybe that I'm gonna put a stop on introducing myself there. What I noticed is that online magical communities during the pandemic really showcased how important it is to give opportunities to people that maybe don't live in big cities, or people that maybe have disabilities, or maybe people just are shy, to just give them the opportunity to experience these experiences, really, right? These practices. Something that I noticed, unfortunately, is that as the pandemic disappeared from our daily discourse. Of course, I think it's still there. I had COVID twice, and I'm suffering from long COVID. So I still feel it in my lungs that it's still there.
Yeah,
right?
I had it about a week and a half ago.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, that's something that's going to be with us for a long time. But of course, the world reopened as it's supposed to do. But what I noticed is that there's unfortunately a lot of conferences or groups went back to do in person only. The problem is that doing this really leaves behind all those people that cannot join an in-person event, and that's kind of bad if you ask me. So that's why I'm very happy that every time that I'm doing it's still online, and as soon as if we'll be able to do in-person events with the Ecclesia Gnostica Universalis, I already have a streaming set up, because the idea is that I think it's important to give accessibility to because these practices are supposed to be for everyone. So that's me in a nutshell. I hope I introduced it.
I'll let Mark go into the next question, because he was going to ask about the magic without tears, but you've answered that already. I'd probably say, unless you want to add a bit.
Yeah, one thing I was wondering about is you're saying about some of the invocations and how people maybe be able to invoke, or what sort of what are the highlights for people? What have people come away with and say this has been fantastic with your system?
So, well, the thing is, what I noticed it's very important is that Magic with the Tears really is a way for people to have an interactive magical primer. Okay, by that I mean most of us who are interested in magic can go on to the local bookstore or on Amazon and buy a series of books on magic, right? And most of them are magical primers. I know that because I've been asked to write one, and it's coming up next year, right? I wanted to write something about something completely different, and then the commission agent was like, we'd rather like you to write an introductory primer on magic. It's what sells, right? It makes sense. The point is that often you read these books and you have no expectation, since you've never done it, and maybe again you've never been part of a group, so you've never had to speak with other people, you never maybe seen other people doing these rituals, you don't know what to expect. And what I notice is that a lot of people have wrong expectations, right? Because again, just an example here, one of the most basic exercises or practices or rituals is the pentagram rituals, right? And if you read Crowley's description definition of it, or maybe even Anke Israel Regardie or other names, important names that wrote about magic, they will tell you that, as you become more and more familiar with these practices, like, I don't know, the invocation will bring down the heavenly host, and you will see the angels, with all their effulgent glory appear in front of you. Well, that means really is that you have to learn how to visualize. You have to learn how to become acquainted with your senses. You have to first of all, you have to also have to learn that magic is not so much into knowing what to say or what gestures to do. It's also about breathing and fueling those gestures and those words with your life force, really. This life force has many names. Prana is the one I like to use, coming from the Sanskrit and the Hindu tradition. But if you've done martial arts, you can think of it as ki or chi, right? This is a similar idea. And all these practices, these rituals, in fact, they're not so dissimilar from martial arts. The aim is different. Martial arts, maybe they're about self-defense or offense, and also about mastery of self. While magical practices are about mastery of self, and the more you master yourself, the more you're able to be in control. One term that we like to use is put yourself at the center of the elemental chaos and aspiring to your holy guardian angel. That's when your senses become more refined, and that's when you can start getting glimpses of other things that are around you. A magician's standpoint is that we're constantly immersed in a sea of spirit. Okay, there's spirit everywhere right now, right over there. Whoever is watching this or listening to my voice, there's spirits all around you right now. You don't see them, and they don't care about you, really. It's the same way you think of it, the way you step into a forest and you are aware that there's life all around you, but I don't know, the squirrel doesn't care about you, really. The ants go around their tasks, and the bees goes around their task, etc., etc. The same way we are surrounded by spirit. Okay, we can get in touch with this spirit, and to do that we have to learn how to refine our senses, to become aware and in control of the elements around us, and which are the traditional four elements: fire, earth, water, and air. And by doing that, you kind of unlock a fifth element, the quintessential spirit. And once you do that, then you start making more sense also of those rituals that at the beginning really seems like you doing, I don't know, katas. If you've never done karate, they do like the forms of martial arts, okay, something like that. So back to your question, and sorry about the ramble, but I ramble a lot.
No, it's okay.
Back to your question, what really happened there is that Zoom allowed us to, maybe present a lesson, and then people go and do it, and then come back and ask me exactly these questions, right? And maybe I was telling you, like, concentrate on this, concentrate on that. Few months in, you would see people that were able to feel what it really means to invoke an angelic presence into yourself. Invocation means to call inside, comes from the Latin invocare, call. Voco means to call inside you, obviously, and that's the first step. It takes some time, but it's relatively simple. You have to learn to be still, become aware of your senses, of the elements, etc. The next step is what you really need to do, what I would say more interactive magic, and that's evocation magic. That's evocare means to call out. This is more similar to what you would think when you think of grimoires, right? The idea of the magician, inside a circle with a triangle of evocation in front of them, and calling the spirit in the triangle that appears maybe to physical manifestation, or maybe appears as smoke, or maybe appears as a sensation, maybe appears as, I don't know, the sound of footsteps around you, maybe appears as a voice that comes into your ear, right? But that's when you feel that you're not just calling something inside you, and you don't partake of that essence, spiritual essence, by mingling with it, but actually you're calling something out and you can have a conversation. I think Jason Miller said something, which is a very good author. You guys should talk with him as well. He wrote fantastic books. And he said that, in evocation, there must be the I and the thou, whereby in invocation there's just you and these other feelings that have come to reside in you and can enrich your experience, right? So long story short, if you go into magic without knowing really what to expect, and without having your maybe wrong expectations, no, I wouldn't say curtailed, but like brought back to the center a little bit, you can maybe miss some important experiences, and maybe you can never learn those important basics that will let you have the more the I and thou experience, like the you and the other experience. So that's what was very good in Magic with OTRs, because I was able, like it happened in magical lodges, in covens, in groups, circles, whatever you want to call it, have a very frank conversation about, this is what magic is. That's really it has some steps, and if you follow the plan, you'll have results pretty much.
We're doing what you've done virtually.
Sorry?
Saying we're doing what you've done virtually with Magic Without Tears.
So we've done. It seems
like you've brought like kind of like magic into modern times, and that's what I was going to go into next in regards to your book. So Aleister Crowley, Thelema and Magic for Modern Times. So was it through obviously your interactions, what you did in the online process to then think,
so basically I would say
that in your book?
We've done things in real time, right? We've done more scrying sessions in real time. By that I mean that that scrying is yet another magical practice, whereby you have usually one person that sits in front of a black mirror or a crystal ball or a shoe stone and tries to concentrate into the device and getting things out of it, like tuning into a radio if you want. Now, the magical part of it is that what we've done, for instance, we would gather on Zoom, right, and we would have one person looking into the shoe stone or the black mirror, another person asking questions, right? Okay, whatever we were in that case. In that time, we did a series of sessions trying to find out the terrorist of Hellier, right? Like, because one of my theories is that is a spirit. Okay, it's a theory I've been working in for years, and also out of respect to the team of Hellier, because they had a lot of people trying to hijack their investigation at the end. Like, it's not something that I'm going to talk about, but that was my. It's one thing that I believe in. I had some evidence of it, and the thing is that, like, we were using a circle whereby we were on Zoom. One person was crying, another person was asking questions, and the other people were maybe chanting some mantras, mantras really are magical sigils that are reduced in a way that you can vocalize. They were concentrating on a sigil, and they were pretty much like projecting all of this onto the scryer. So imagine there was almost like a virtual circle and with the scryer in the middle and the questioner in front of the scryer, which is pretty much what you would do in a magical lodge in real life. You would have a circle of people that were not just there to assist what's happening, but they're creating a circle. They're generating energy, magical energy, prana, and focusing it into the scryer, so that the scryer can be more energized and can have more, let's say, maybe can receive better gnosis, better information from the process. So that's definitely something we've done plenty of times. Something we didn't do on screen but we did at the same time, everyone, and by everyone I mean literally like hundreds of people across the world. A lot of them are still to this day are in the United States, but several are here in the UK, several across Europe, some in South Korea, some in some in Australia. So like across the world, find the same time, and all of us we would do maybe like an evocation. We did the Arbatel. The Arbatel is a magical grimoire. Usually it's the easiest and the simplest one. You want to use it first because you want to experience it first, because it evokes the whole, or the Olympic spirits, or the spirits of the planets, and they tend to be some people will disagree with me, but tend to be very benign, okay? Or at least more structured and more easy to deal with than the demons of the Goetia, which I don't think they're evil. I don't believe in evil. I don't believe in good either. I believe in experience. And but the demons of the Goetia definitely are more sanguine, right? They're more human-like, okay? So they have more of a temperament, whereby the Olympic spirits tend to be more this immutable, cosmic energies. So the good way, if you want to try evocation, you should do all the basics that actually that's what the book is about. That kind of you to prepare for you to try your first evocation, and then you should definitely start with the Arbatel. But again, like we did it over 7 months. There are 7 Olympic spirits. We would meet every day, once a month on a specific day, on a specific planetary hour. We would just go in it, and we had fantastic results. But for me, it was really a testament of what I know it to be true already, is that magic works if you have the will to be consistent about it, right? Magic works if you understand that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Like if you want to start doing magic, you need to start doing it knowing that for the next maybe year, you will feel very little. I exaggerate here because as we said before, people had a lot of results much earlier, but also because it was lockdown times. There was nothing else to do. Like everybody we were just reading about magic. There's magic. That was it, right? Now it's different, right? Also, the reason why I was telling you, we went from having 200 concurrent members to 100 concurrent members because, half of them went to their normal lives, I'd say, and that's fine. But the idea is that if you live a normal life where, you commute to work, come back, have a family, go out to the movies, all these things that we need to do to survive as a species, I would say, you will need maybe a year, 9 months to a year to start really having serious feedback. And once you know that you made that commitment and you stick with it, results will come. What I can tell you in my experience is completely bollocks, is a lot of the stuff you maybe hear on YouTube or see on Reddit or on the internet. You use this word and everything will unlock for you. You conjure this demon and everything will happen. First of all, demon's not going to come, because you don't have enough energy to conjure anything at the beginning, right? Oh, but I am a hereditary witch. No, you're not. That's not a thing. I tend to be very very blunt on these things. Magic for me is much more of an art than it is a science. And even Crowley really tried to define it in both ways. And in the book, I say that possibly it did because, first of all, of course, Crowley, most popular definition of magic was the science and art of causing change to occur in accordance with will. But you maybe will notice that he really describes it as the union of science and art. So it's the rational and the inspired. And I think that Crowley was living in a time when science was starting to finally fully explain the world around him. So he wanted to almost capture a piece of that in order that he could market magic better, right? Mm-hmm. In time, I think he really came to understand that magic is so much more an art than it is a science. And so, yes, talent, your talent will matter, as it matters in every talent. Like, you can decide to play guitar. I'm a guitarist, that's why I'm saying that. But I'm not a very talented guitarist, right? I can play okay, but I've seen people that are really talented, and they would pick and go, right, and do things. Magic is kind of like that. So there will be people that are more talented, but overall, a talented person with no consistency will not be able to have the same results that a consistent person with a little talent will have. Now, of course, if you marry the two and you have the talented person that is also consistent, then you get Crowley, I suppose. But that's that's 1 in a million, maybe 1 in 100,000, maybe not a million, 100,000. That you got the point.
The next question is: can you really give us a definition of what magic is?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think we touched on that, right? Something that I said before, right? Yeah, Crowley and I describe it as the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. Thing is, will in that phrase, you got to think of it with a capital W, okay? Because that term assumes a very specific meaning in Crowley's system of esoteric philosophy, which is called Thelema. In fact, Thelema is a Greek word from the Koine Greek and means will itself. Will, it's not whatever you want to do, okay? And this is also where I tend to lose a lot of people that are interested in Thelema at first, because they come to Thelema thinking, oh, you know what, I want to just join this very hedonistic, I do what I want kind of philosophy. Will is the absolute opposite of it. Will, in fact, implies a very strict, almost stoic approach to life and the incarnated experience, in fact, because that will, it's a process. It's something that you do not start with. You cannot begin with true will. And that's a little reference to a book that was announced some months ago and never came to light, possibly because they realized it was full of shit. Sorry for my French. But the point is also that you will only discover what your will is at the end of that process that we just discussed so far, at the end of that marathon, right? Like that's when you discover your will. And in fact, it implies that you can only use magic, as Crowley intended it, so the art and science of causing change according to your will, only once you've discovered your will. And that discovering of your will, you can think of it like discovering who you are. Why are you here? What is that you're supposed to do? There's so much more to that. As you can imagine, being such a cardinal point of a very complex magical philosophy, I'm only skimming on the surface here. Mm-hmm. But to give you another little perspective, once you know your true will, you're not afraid of death anymore. You fully understand what death is, and you face it without any fear whatsoever, but with certainty. And you have no doubts anymore about who you are. Why are you doing what you're doing? This doesn't mean that you become detached from your feelings, in the sense that that's where it really, I think, diverges from maybe a very simplistic understanding of Stoicism, but there's a lot of similarities in there, right, between Thelema and Stoic thinking. So, long story short, really, magic is the tool that allows you to do what you incarnated to do. And that's down to you. Like, nobody can tell you what that is. Only you can at the end of the process of discovery. Now, one thing that it's important to add, I think, is that Crowley also, especially in his later years, talking with one of his disciples called Carl Germer, he also stated that magic is getting in communications with individuals who exist on a higher plane than ours. Mysticism is the raising of oneself to their level. So this means that the nature of these beings, of these spirits, ultra-terrestrials, UFOs, you can call it, right? The intertwining of magic and mystic practices and the result of these communications are the very core of the magician's experience. So what does magicians do? First of all, they discover who they are. Once they've done that, they do that. They do what they are, right? With a specific attention in constantly trying and find information that is constantly filtered by that sea of spirit that surrounds us that I mentioned before. This is where the communication with spirit is paramount, and this is where, maybe in a more modern lens, the communication with whatever we call, ultra-terrestrials, UFO, UAPs, it's also very important. I would say also this tends to be a bit of a heretical thought in magician circles. Not so, maybe in later years, maybe also thanks to Hellier, things have been changing. But, for the longest time, if you were a serious magician, which is kind of like, a nonsensical thing to say anyway, but if you're a serious magician, you would not talk about UFOs, right? And over the years, things have been, that part came and went. In the 70s was very popular with Kenneth Grant. In the 90s was very popular again when my friend Peter Levenda wrote, Sinister Forces, which is fantastic, by the way. Peter wrote the introduction to my book, so thank you. Like if you're able to read it, he really pictured it in a very nice way. And again, like he is another person that really insisted over the years on how a magician will have to get in touch with higher intelligences that we can call in many ways. It doesn't really matter how we call them. Much more important is that we have these connections. And 20 years later, here we are once again, where we're finally going back in the magical discourse where, yes, spirit connection is important. We need to explore it because, like we as humans, doesn't matter how enlightened or awakened we think we are, which is always, I think, always a sort of a trap to fall into, to think yourself as awakened. You can always know more. You always get more noses, more information from whatever lies beyond the limits of our incarnated existence. Once again, Jason Miller described us as, spirits aggregated around a physical body, but we are surrounded by consciousness that doesn't aggregate around a physical body. And maybe that free them and make them more prone to have, better information, more information, and, getting more information and better information it's what's going to serve us well in our quest of understanding who we are and what we're doing here. And I would say where we're going next.
Yeah. But only just back to Peter Lavender there. Did he co-author Secret Machines as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
He actually I have it here. The first one, Secret Machine Gods.
Yeah.
And this is the first one, the one that goes. I mean, he's doing this trilogy. I don't know. Gods is out. Man is out as well. I don't think War is out yet. He's doing this with Tom DeLonge. And he was actually contacted by Tom DeLonge because he and the people in To the Stars Academy read, I think, Sinister Forces.
Yeah.
And Peter is an interesting guy. Like if there's one real, like the idea of a real magician, it's him.
I've got the smaller and lazy copy of the audio one.
Yeah.
Actually, what's it? Sorry, Christian.
Then you go.
I was going to say, what is Secret Machines? I'm not aware of this. This is news to me.
So it's basically how can I put this? It's a series of books that try to explain to the layman. By that I mean like literally someone who has never heard of this concept and maybe come from very strict backgrounds. The fact that we might soon be presented with an influx of information coming from somewhere else, right? Something Tom DeLonge is absolutely convinced is this idea of disclosure, right? That has been so discussed in recent years, because I mean, definitely something has been happening. Like we've been living in unprecedented times. We still do. At the time of recording, we're still in a very weird position everywhere in geopolitics, right? I mean, like he's convinced that the aliens are coming. But the point is, what Peter does in these books tries to explain what are the aliens, right? Yeah. Like, are they like little green men coming from another planet? Or maybe there's so much more to understand about it, right? I would say that, Peter and we definitely are not into the nuts and bolts kind of discourse. Like it could be possible that we've been visited, we are being visited, we will be visited by physical beings like you and I that moves into physical crafts. But what's much more probable is that these are sort of downloads of informations that exist on different planes than ours. Like they literally exist as frequencies, like traversing the planes of existence. And that's, let's say, that's what Secret Machines is about. You should, if you're interested in this, and you are, pick it up. And even like I said, I just read, been reading the first one. It's fantastic. The thing is, like Peter Levenda is a fantastic writer. Like he would sell you anything by his writing, like because he has a way with words. You just read about it. Okay, I'm just happy about reading this, right? But the information is very good as well. So
they're pretty good. I mean,
I recommend it.
They're pretty good as ones I was going to go back and read. You know what I mean? Because it's a lot to digest. And
oh yeah, absolutely.
I went through it. There are a few I've got an audiobook. But yeah, really, really good. You know what I mean? Really good.
No, I mean, you're right. Like there's a lot of information. It bought in Secret Machines, from what I read so far, but especially when you go back in Sinister Forces. Mm-hmm. Sinister Forces kind of is Secret Machines, but for esotericists. Yeah. So for people that know a little bit more. And there's a ton of information. Like imagine Pennyroyal podcast times 2000, which is pretty much what Pennyroyal is behind the scenes, right? Yeah. And that's so much there. Because again, the world we live in, it's way more complex than our day-to-day life needs it to be. We need to go about our lives with some certainties, right? The problem is that when you go in deeper, you realize that there is a lot there. Without delving into crazy conspiracy theories, I'm going to tell you right away, I am really against, I'm very, very outspoken about against conspiracy theories when they are, fronts for political ideologies or, that kind of idea. But I also the kind of person that say, hey, you know what, the world is way much more complex than, you hear on the news. Obviously, because it's the world is very complex. It's a complex system, and the more you engage with magic, the more you engage with this kind of practice, you open yourself up to even more layers of complexity. And the idea is that my experience is to just sit down, breathe deeply, accept the fact that we have, in fact, a limited amount of cognitive power. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that not to get overwhelmed by all of this, and maybe also not think that we can maybe ever make sense of all of it, right? Like I think this was Alan Moore that very famously said that, I'm not quoting verbatim, but the idea is that the world is not as the conspiracy theories wanted, because there's no one in control. The world is rudderless. And that's exactly, that has been my experience, right? I would say maybe that rudderless chaos can be taken in and can be subsumed a little bit so that we can actually accept its immensity, but it is immense. And that is what's meant to be.
I do think that the more you look into all these different subjects, the more you actually realise you swallow the red pill and there's no going back.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
So just kind of coming back to like the generalisation, like let's say for the cult, right? So over the past, like say going back in like maybe 80s, 90s, stuff like that. There's got quite people seen it as a negative thing, or people seen it as like kind of got bad connotations. People saying it's Satanist and things like that. Why do you think that was? It just got kind of a bad rep?
Well, the thing is, occult itself, again, from Latin occultus, occultare, means something that's hidden, right? Yeah. So whatever is hidden, whatever you don't know, it scares you. Lovecraft said that the greatest feeling that humans can experience is fear, right? And that's true, right? Like it's one of those primeval instincts. Like we have a really knee-jerk reaction to fear. That's what it's meant to do to us. So not knowing will generate prejudice, will generate fear. And this is ignorant. I would say this is the ignorance part of the equation, why, cult practitioners are seen as negative or evil even. The other part, I want to be honest about that there's a lot of edgelordy bullshit in occultism as well. Like there's a lot of people that will play the part of the evil, the base, the Satanist. Crowley himself was one of them. Crowley was never a Satanist, right? Like the thing is, you oftentimes 9 times out of 10, Crowley, the famous Satanist. Crowley was not a Satanist. Like Crowley was not even part of like the left-hand path, which is this umbrella term that comes from a badly read understanding of theosophists of Hinduist practices, whereby, in Hinduism, in Tantra especially, you can have, 2 way of doing things. One called the Dakshina Marga, the right-hand path, and one called the Vama Marga, the left-hand path. They're just 2 ways of doing things, okay? One may, the Vama Marga, the left-hand path might be a little bit more iconoclastic, but that's about it. Comes the Theosophist, they think, okay, the right-hand path is the good, the left-hand path is the bad, because Theosophy was really about, dividing everything in white and black. That's where the ideas of the White Lodge and Black Lodge comes from. Maybe we'll discuss about it later. But the idea is that, one is good and one is bad. Absolutely bollocks. Different ways of doing things. And Crowley himself, which was, his experiences, his life, his philosophy was informed by Theosophy, did take some of this in. And in fact, in his writing, he would say that he was of the right-hand path, because he was actually looking to, go reunite with the Godhead, whereby, and he would call whoever doesn't do their true will, whoever become entrenched into their own delusions of grandeur, they were the left-hand path. And now in 2020, in fact, since I started looking into this in the 90s, it wasn't really like this. You would see a lot of people playing on the idea that Crowley was a Satanist, was a left-hand path practitioner, he was evil, and that's why it's good, right? So I think that, there's a lot of maybe childish iconoclastism, also the idea of going against the grain, going against the governments, which, in many ways could be a good thing, in fact, especially in times like this. But that's also what plays into the into the field of those who will just try and demonize everything. So long story short, I think that ignorance plays a big part, but also, the antics of occultism and plays a little part as well. This is why I do what I do, in fact, because I try to be very open about the practices we do. I try to, in the book I wrote, it's really for everyone. Like, it's really for everybody who's never even read about Thelema or Crowley. You can pick it up and try to make sense of what it is, hopefully showing that there is nothing evil in it. It's a path of self-mastery, it's a path of self-realization. I would argue that maybe you will find, no matter what, like the fanatic Christians or the fanatic of any kind of religion, really, that will say, oh, that is bad. It's because something has been told to me, like, you cannot, if you look for your self-mastery, you're denying God in your life. The answer I gave them, I'm not denying God, I am God. So that's the thing, like, you are God, and the cat is God, and everyone is God. So the thing is, but I would say that there will be the fanatic religious type that if they hear this thing, will say, oh no, you're evil. So I don't think we will never move beyond the path where someone will see this practice, any practice of self-realization, self-mastery, as dangerous or evil. And I guess that's okay. We got to live with it. It's definitely true that we are once again living in potentially dangerous times. The so-called satanic panic has been making a comeback. I've seen it. I've been exposed to it. There's no doubt about it. It's very tied in this day and age with far-right extremism, especially in the United States, but also here in the UK. There's a lot of interesting names, especially up there in Scotland, by the way. So it's something that, again, it's something that's on my mind, right? Especially as a relatively public figure. I do public events now that COVID has stopped, right? Like, and I put my face and my name out there. Yeah. But at the same time, I've been a public face. I mean, I've been a musician before when I was younger, so I don't know what it's like to be under the spotlight. It's if you're a new person, I would say these are not completely safe times. And I'm not going to mince with words. Right? I used to live. I remember living through safe times, right? When you could just do whatever you wanted and nobody cared. That was like the 90s themselves to a degree. Surely like the noughties and the 2010s up until 2015, 2016. That's when things started going down the drain. And now it's a bit of a difficult time, but it happened before, and it's not nearly as bad as what it already has been. Like, a lot of my friends that are older than me were targets of the satanic panic in the 80s, and that was when people lost their jobs or people were physically attacked. We're not there yet, and maybe we will not get there again, because in the meantime we had another 30 years where a lot of things became more acceptable in society, as they should be. But yeah, it's ignorance sucks. Let's put it like that.
I was wondering about going back to Crowley. You mentioned a few things about him being to the Theosophical Society. Can you maybe tell us about some of the religions and practices that he studied and how they influenced his beliefs?
So Crowley starts his life in a very fanatical household. He starts his life as a member of the Plymouth Brethren, especially as a member of the Exclusive Brethren. Like, if the Plymouth Brethren are a fanatical sect in Christianity, the Exclusive Brethren are the fanatics of the fanatics, like the worst of the lot. Up until he went to college, he could only read from the Bible. Nothing else was allowed for him to read. Maybe that's why why he rebelled so much against the tenets of Christianity. I don't know if you know, the name of the great beast was his mother gave it to him, because he was a very unruly child, and apparently he had his way with the maidens. So when he was reached the teenage years, and his mother dubbed him the Great Beast, and apparently he really liked it. Right, so that stick with him. But the point being is that so that's a very strong understanding of Christianity. It's the beginning of Crowley. And that's also the moment he decides to rebel against it, right? And that's why he goes to Cambridge, and he experiments with all sorts of sexuality. He was definitely what we would call today a gender fluid individual across his life, and his preference, in fact, was homosexual. In fact, and he experimented with it all for his life. It definitely started in Cambridge. That's also when he became acquainted with I would say his first spiritual practice was mountaineering, of all things, because he was a very keen mountaineer, actually very, very skilled. It's funny because we have this idea of Crowley past his prime as this very fat, raccoon, like kind of like jubbly kind of guy. I mean, up until his 40s, he was in perfect shape, right? Because he was climbing everywhere. He befriended Oscar Heckerstein, which was a very famous climber, and they attempted the K2 climb, and it failed. And in fact, it failed badly. Crowley ended up being responsible for the death of some people in that expedition, and that's kind of where his mountaineering exploits kind of ended there. From that point onward, he started to get interested in everything that was coming from the East. And by that, I mean also the Middle East, like Egypt, right? Gotta remember, this was the late Victorian period. Egyptomania was at its highest, and the influx of the Theosophical Society was growing very strongly. Crowley was born in 1875, the year of the foundation of the Theosophical Society, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think I'm right. And so, 25 years later, he immerses himself into all these things. And from a magical standpoint, what really captures his interest is the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is possibly single-handedly the most important magical group that we ever had here in the West, okay? Even more so than the Theosophical Society. Maybe the Theosophical Society has really left its imprint in the mystical understanding of the human experience, whereby Magick was really reformulated and organized and structured by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. They were they started from as an offshoot of a magical Masonic society called the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia, which means the Rosicrucian Society of England. And three of them, Wynne, Westcott, and Mathers, wanted to do something even more magical than what the SRAA was allowing them to do. Still keeping a little bit of the Masonic structure, but reformulating everything and having something outside of Freemasonry, pretty much. And that's where the Golden Dawn came to be. The Golden Dawn also, was one of the first groups that allowed women in it. And it has to be said that the Golden Dawn leaders, for the most, always been women. Florence Farr, a famous actress, was not only a member, but one of the main forces behind the Golden Dawn. Was the Hierophant or chief adept of Isis Urania, which was the first temple here in London. And I'm thinking about many other important, famous women: Annie Horniman, Moina Mathers, which was born Moina Berson, which was the sister of the famous French philosopher, Maud Gonne, the famous Irish revolutionary. Plenty of important women, and that was kind of like groundbreaking at the time. If you think about it, right? Crowley, this is the word Crowley gets invited into. And Crowley, being very, very skilled at magic, he kind of like goes through the first order, or rather, it's called the third order, the lowest one, very fast. He excels at everything, and at the same time, he finds himself in a position of having excelled at everything, being very eager to go to the next levels, but in a time where the Golden Dawn was coming to the schism that would end its first incarnation. I'm not going to go too much in detail. I don't think you're interested in the history of the Golden Dawn, but that's what his first experience was. This unravels around the year the turn of the century, really. And after the Golden Dawn in its first incarnation collapses, Crowley becomes very disappointed and very unhappy with the experience, and kind of leaves everything behind for a while. So what he does, he decides to get married, as you do, and with his first wife, they go on a honeymoon around the world. You got to understand that Crowley was very rich at the time. He was the inheritor of a small fortune that has been quantified between 2 and 6 millions of today's pounds, from his father, because the Crowley's family was very they had a brewery, Crowley beers. I still go still go on. You still can buy them, and there's this story that we don't know if I don't know if it's a legend. It's possible, maybe not, that one of the reasons why the Crowley pubs became very rich, it's because they kind of invented the idea of the Sunday roast. I don't know. I never looked too much into it, but it's likely. Let's put it like that. Like, at least they kind of started offering a proper roast on Sundays, right? And of course, people flock into the place, make a lot of money. This was Crowley's grandfather. So Crowley has a lot of money at this point in time. Eventually would squander everything, by the way, which I never really figured how, because that's a lot of money, but still.
Traveled a really good bit though.
Yeah, the thing is that he really would live large, and he lived large for up until his late 20s, maybe mid 30s. So for a long time, living large, he squandered. And by large, I mean like literally, like he would get, rent the best suites at the hotels, a lot of going around in finery. You get the idea. So he marries Rose Kelly, and they go around the world in their honeymoon. And in March 1st, and then April 1904, something happens that would change his life forever. And that is that his wife receives a series of communications from something or someone that would tell Crowley like where they are waiting for you. And so Crowley, knowing that Rose up until that point never showed any interest in his weird interest of magic, say, well, who's they? And that day, so he brings her to the Bulak Museum to see if she can find this day anywhere. And lo and behold, she points to one specific Egyptian stele, a funerary stele, the funerary stele of a priest called Ankafna Konsu, which was a priest of the god Mentu in Thebes, thousands of years before. Mm-hmm. And on the stele, you see three gods, right? But first of all, you're going to understand that this concept of gods in Egyptian traditional mythology is kind of complex because, the same god would have different aspects, right? And then when you translate this into Thelema and Magick, it gets even more complex. But let's use the term god for now. The three gods you find on the stele are Ra-Ur-Kuit or Horus. You find Nuit, which, by the way, is the lady that you see behind me, with the night sky, and the wind globe, which Crowley would call it Hadith. The real name is Behudi, which is like the solar disk. Okay.
Yeah.
And so Crowley remains very, very shocked by this realization. Anyway, he plays along and finds out that his wife gives him very specific instructions for a ritual that he does, and out of these rituals come the Book of the Law, Liber Alve Legis. Mm-hmm. Liber Alve Legis is a relatively short book of 220 verses, bit more because some verses are longer than just one line, but that you get the idea. Divided in 3 chapters. Each chapter is one of these gods that talk. So the first chapter is Nuit, the second chapter is Hadith, the third chapter is Ra-Ur-Kuit. And this book is dictated by an entity that calls himself Haivas and presents himself as the minister of Horpar-Krat. Horpar-Krat being Harpocrates or Horus the Younger. So once again, we see that there's what I was telling you, the idea that there's so many different things and the same god maybe can have different aspects at the same time. Anyway, he writes it down, and this becomes the Tantra, the illuminated gnosis of Thelema. It gives a lot of instructions on what to do, what to expect, pretty much like how to set up a new religion. Mm-hmm. Something that's also important to understand is that, and we really cannot get too much into this because there's a lot to say by the book. But the point is, what happens here is that a new eon comes into play. Mm-hmm. An eon is a term that refers both to a period of time and to a series of instructions, of laws, of formulas. Okay, mm-hmm. You can really think of it as installing a new operating system, right? From time to time, new operating systems comes along, and it doesn't matter if you want to, you can decide not to install it immediately, but eventually if you don't, your tech becomes so obsolete that you will have to upgrade anyway. I mean, it's a terrible analogy, but I guess you get the idea. That's what happened there. You realize that there's been this change, there's been this new eon came into being, and this means new magic, new ways of doing things.
It's a very good analogy. It's a very good analogy for it.
Yeah, I think he would have liked it actually. It's better in the book. Anyway, point being is that like he realizes that he has to do something with it, and for many years he just hates it and tries to do nothing at all. At that time, by the way, Crowley was pretty much like, he left the Golden Dawn behind. He was disappointed with it, kind of tried to be a Buddhist. He studied Zen. He just tried to live a relatively normal life for some years. Eventually, between the end of 1906 and beginning of 1907, with one of his old friends from the Golden Dawn, he realizes that it does come the time where he cannot deny the magic and the information in the Book of the Law anymore, and he has to do something about it. And he structures a new order called the AA, Argentum Astrum, which it's Latin for Silver Star. It has to be said that Argentum Astrum also is the public name of this order. There's a secret name for those who are member of it, or so I'm told. And pretty much the Argentum Astrum becomes like Golden Dawn 2.0, but Thelemic. All the information that came from the Book of the Law, and the information that Crowley derives by getting in touch with these entities once again and receiving more information. In those months, he receives many more books that put together forms what are called the Holy Book of Thelema. And in all, there's like 12 of them, the most important ones, at least in my opinion. This one gave pretty much a new set of things to do, okay? And so that's where he structured the AA as a continuation of the Golden Dawn. He keeps the same structure based on Kabbalah, Hermetic Kabbalah. That means not Jewish Kabbalah. That's very important to say. The Kabbalah we use in magic, it's a simplified, reduced version, and has almost nothing to do with the original Jewish Kabbalah. We also use different spelling, right? We spell it with a Q as opposed with a K. And long story short, that's what he tries to do. He tries to keep on doing magic. We're not at the end of the story, because a few years later, again, 1912 now, so between 6 and 5 years later, the foundation of the AA, he is invited, kind of forced, to become the leader of the British branch of the OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, or Order of the Temple of the East. Ordo Templi Orientis at this point is what is called as an Academia Pan-Masonica. That means an attempt by a series of German Freemasons to simplify in only 9 degrees everything that Freemasonry had to offer, both regular Freemasonry and esoteric Freemasonry. On top of that, they would try to introduce also concepts of yoga and Tantra that were starting to filter from the East. A lot of things a lot of ideas to try and just 9 initiations, like 9 operative degrees. You would have to learn all these things all at once. Crowley, jumps, ever the person looking for spotlight, jumps to the occasion, and of course it takes to him to reform the British branch of the OTO, makes it Thelemic. Again, in his idea, the AA would have been, the magical school, and the OTO would be a magical school as well, but one with a Masonic flair. And you gotta remember, Freemasonry was the playground of kings and princes and dukes at the time. Yeah. I mean, today it's not really like that, and it hasn't been for decades now. But at the time, it was literally a very exclusive place to be. So it was like, okay, I'm gonna get a piece of that, obviously, and I'm gonna make it Thelemic. And he did. And to try and wrap this all up, all of these efforts failed. The AA never really took off. I mean, it exists to this day in different lineages and different branches. Like the Golden Dawn somehow survived over the years in different lineages and different branches. I would say all the orders that you find today and you can join today, including the ones I joined, because of course I joined the AA in 1999, 1998, and then the OTO 10 years ago. They are reconstructions. There's no unbroken lineage from Crowley. This is something that might come to surprise for some of you, and I'm pretty sure that maybe will be people in the comments, maybe on YouTube, and say, "Oh no, that's a lie because my lineage is the right one." That's bullshit. No, that's not true. There's no unbroken lineage. There never was. All these groups were never big in Crowley's time because he was terrible at organizing things. He was too big of an ego. He was impossible to work with. He was a genius, no doubt about it, but he was not somebody. It's Elon Musk on Twitter right now. Okay, that's it. That's the idea that I can give you, right? Like a very intelligent person with a lot of ideas, but maybe not the best person you want to run anything at all. And so like there, even with the OTO. There were attempts made during the 40s to expand in the United States with names like Jack Parsons, which is a name you hear a lot. Like he became a member and he tried to run something in Pasadena, in California before. As always happens, came at odds with Crowley and went to do his own thing. Other people tried to ingratiate the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in Detroit. So the Grand Lodge, the Supreme Grand Council, I don't remember how it's called. The Supreme Grand something of Michigan. It failed. There's a beautiful book on that if you're curious. It's called Panic in Detroit by Richard Kaczynski. Super funny. Like it tells you how bad they were constantly fucking up everything because they were a lot of ideas, but they were really not the best people to talk to other people pretty much. And eventually Crowley and all these orders kind of disappeared after the 40s and the 50s, really. What really happened was with the late 60s, Summer of Love, right? With the Beatles, with the Rolling Stones, there was a resurgence of interest in Crowley. And it was the 70s that then saw some people try to come together and reconstruct these things, because we did have the rituals, like we had the material, we had the diaries, we had an idea of how these things were done. But when it comes and there were living people that knew Crowley, like Grady McMurtry was a direct disciple of Crowley, that eventually went on and reconstructed the OTO in the United States, and the OTO you can join today. Don't, but if you want to do that, that's what you're going to do. You're going to join the OTO that was reconstructed by Grady McMurtry. Mm-hmm. This is, I think it's important because I really like to kind of demystify the ideas you have around these groups, because it's not important. The group is not important, really. As I said at the very beginning, what's important is your attitude towards magic and how much you want to invest in it, how much you're going to be consistent about it. Yes, having a mentor is very useful, right? But I would say that if you think that, you need somebody to put your hands on top of your head and pass something on to you, that's true for certain lineages, but not for all. And you can still do it on yourself, because at the end of the day, true initiation comes from what we call the Holy Guardian Angel, your higher self, your better self, the ones that teaches you your true will. And that is God, that is the divine, okay? You can learn how to get in touch with the divine without anybody putting a hand on you and say, hey, now you're first degree, now you're second degree. In fact, in my experience, and I wrote extensively about it, if people are curious, they can find on Medium my story of why I left the OTO. In general, my experience is every hierarchical group tends to breed nepotism and abuse, and you don't want that. Like, we have enough of that in our day-to-day lives, I think. So it's like, do we want more of that? I don't think so.
So moving on to so Crowley. I mean, although studying all these religions and what he did, he was coined by the media at the time as the wickedest man in the world, right? Do you reckon that was down to the fact, just the way he lived his life, rather than actually his occult practices or his practices with religions? I mean, so why do you think that was?
You got to understand that all the nicknames that Crowley were given to him, that Crowley received during his lifetime, were given to him by the Daily Mail. you know. And I think that's all we need to say. Like, as we all live in the United Kingdom, right? We know what it means, right? But if anybody here is not listening, it doesn't know what the Daily Mail is. It's the rag. It's the worst. It's the worst of the worst, right?
It's funny.
It's
though,
literally.
they put a recent UAP article out, which was I just found like astonishing for the kind of. I'm sure it was Daily Mail that came out. It was just like it was kind of totally just out the chart for me. I was like, well, sorry, on you go.
No, but the thing is that like you gotta understand that he was a man that loved to be at the center of the attention. He was a narcissist, I believe. Right. Now, I'm not a psychologist. Maybe I dabbled in it a little bit when I was at university, but my master is anthropology. Thing is, I cannot really diagnose anybody, nor I can diagnose an historical person. But like kind of sees that there was a lot of narcissism in him. Like most geniuses are narcissistic to a degree. And he loved to be the center of the attention because he thought that as with Oscar Wilde, like every all sorts of publicity is good publicity. Yeah. And unfortunately, like, he never really realized how bad it was for Oscar Wilde at the end of his life, right? Had to be exiled, etc. And Crowley kind of went that way because he loved to shock. He lived a very libertine life. He was very promiscuous in his sexual escapades with men and women alike, often together. He wrote obscene poetry and he published it. And by obscene, I mean obscene by our today's standards. I dare you or anybody listening to read Le Sublime without having a little bit of reaction to it, because it speaks about scatology and he was engaging with it, with his practices. And when we read his diaries, the diaries of Leah Hirsig, which was one of his partners, maybe one of the most important, maybe the most important of his partners.
Is it true that? Is it true? Just come back to his poetry. Is it true that some of his kind of first, as in like more kind of rude poetry, it couldn't even publish it in the UK? It had to be published abroad.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Most of his book, after the Cambridge period, so after like he was in his like early 20s, were published in France, like Magic Interior Practice. The first edition is Le Crème Presse, which was published in France, in Paris. He couldn't publish things yet because, again, also in his magical practices, he speaks kind of openly of sexual intercourse. Magic with the K is spelled with the K because, yes, he wanted to differentiate it from illusionism, like stage magic. Yeah. Also, he wanted to define that tool to to discover your true will, as we discussed at the beginning of the podcast. But the reality is that the K itself is a giveaway to that. If it speaks of sex magic. K, it's ktes, which is it's a Greek term for vulva. The idea that, the Holy Grail really becomes like the vulva. It has to be inserted by the phallus, and the union of the two create the elixir that you have to ingest in order to, let's say, create a much higher reaction to these magical practices. Okay. I'm not giving too much away, but it's all out there. Right? There's almost no secrets anymore. You can find most of it out there. So long story short, I mean, this is why it was dubbed like this, because the Daily Mail, which is the rag, right? Like they would really shit on everybody. They found the perfect person. Oh, look at this. This person is so open about doing it with everything that breathes and using it as a mockery of like religious cults. But there's also the fact that Crowley also went to mock them back in the sense and say, like, in his diaries, and in fact not just in his diaries, in one of the notes of Magic Interior Practice, which is his magnum opus, it says that the Master Therion, which is, by the way, the Therion is a Greek term, means the beast. So the beast is the beast of the apocalypse, by the way. So he was really playing into this role, and of course, this was really getting all the Christian fanatics on which pretty much was most people at the time, right? On their very scared. So it says in one of these notes that the Master Therion has killed something like, let's say, 100,000 child per year in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I
And
know
the thing
what
is
that
that that means he was masturbating a lot. That's what it means. But he would say he would write these things to rile people up.
Yeah,
And
you're saying that
and
referring to sperm and stuff. Yeah, that's
exactly. So and like all his published work is littered with these ideas, right? And that's how he got his name. At the same time, if you read the reports of other people that knew him, like Nina Cunard, which was like the Queen of Bohemia, he would talk of him in the highest terms possible. A lot of people had a lot of good things to say about Crowley because he was a unique man. He was a fantastic man. He was a larger than life character. He was also somebody that treated most of his partners poorly, abysmally, terribly. He left his wife when she started becoming ill and ended up an alcoholic and died. He abused by that I really mean, I think, mentally and possibly sexually abused one of his disciple and lover at the time, Victor Neuburg. Victor Neuburg went to become the guy who discovered Dylan Thomas. So, somebody that actually wrote some beautiful poetry himself. And for the rest of his life, he was very, traumatized by the experience with Crowley. He could be like this incredibly enlightened individual and incredibly horrible human being. He was a walking contradiction. So in many ways, as somebody who studied him, as somebody who calls himself a Thelemite, not a Crowleyite, Thelemite, there's a difference there. But somebody that definitely has a lot of respect for Crowley as a magician, I don't have much respect for him as a man because I think that he, in the end, he liked it too much to be the wickedest man in the world. And, while part of it was not deserved, because again, was the Daily Mail trying to demonize somebody who was just living their life, there was a lot of bad shit that he did and unacceptable stuff. Like Crowley would have definitely been uncancelled in this day and age. And I think he would have been cancelled for the right reasons. Because, all the shit is done to his partners would come out and say, like, we don't want to hear any more from this person.
Yeah.
That's the point.
So, talking about Crowley from the paranormal perspective, what sort of like unearthly influences or experiences do you have? Do you have any experiences that would go into the confines of the paranormal, like maybe visitations or anything like that?
I mean, how much time do you have? Yes, like his diaries are. So Crowley was a graphomaniac, and he left us so much written material, and most of it, in fact, is you can access it is in various collections around the world. Well, one of the biggest one, if not the biggest one, is here in London at Warburg Institute, and despite popular tales, you can access it. You just have to know your ways into the Warburg and knowing what you need to be a member of to access the collections. Point being is that he left us a lot of diaries, and he was very good at, he preached this idea that magicians need to keep a very extensive diary of all their operations, because keeping the diary creates a timeline that you can always go back to and see what you were doing at this time and how everything pieces together, in across your own timeline. And so his diary are full of experiences where he was trying to conjure all kinds of spirits using grimoires. Eventually, from the mid 1910s onwards, he would start using almost exclusively sex magic. By that I mean, engaging with sexual intercourse, getting to certain trance states with the sexual intercourse, and using those trance states to invoke, or so calling inside themselves, or evoke spirits of various kind. I think some of the most important ones were, of course, back in the day, Ivas, the one that gave him the Book of the Law, and then this two specific characters came out that were very interesting: the wizard Abuldiz and the wizard Amalantra. those we know very little of the nature of the spirits, right? The spirits were not called in traditional methods. By that I mean were not called by grimoire magic. And grimoire magic, I mean, let's say there's a lot of specific tools and specific steps you have to do. This was much more like a free-form way of calling spirits, right? And these spirits gave Crowley a lot of insights on not just his life or what he would do to keep promulgating the law of Thelema, the system of Thelema in the world. Now, I think that the Wizard Amalantra is possibly the most interesting of them all because it came out in a very specific time of Crowley's life when he was really undergoing some very high initiations. So he was like trying to become more and more of an awakened master, if you want to use this term. And the story goes that out of these Amalantra workings, a very famous painting came out. This painting is a painting that's been called Lam, or The Way. And it's the painting that pretty much represents what we would call today kind of like a gray, an alien gray, like, an almond-shaped head, big head, in this case with very tiny eyes compared to the big eyes that you have in the grays, very tiny mouth. And especially one of his disciples that went to become a very famous magician by himself, an adept called Kenneth Grant, would use lamb, and so let's say like the fruit of the Amalantra working, as the focus of his own brand of Thelema, which will become called Typhonian Thelema, which is literally focused on the idea of connecting with other intelligences, opening gates to other universes, and mingling with whatever comes out, right? Kenneth Grant would use a lot of inspiration from Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos in it, which gave him a lot of shit over the years because, again, serious occultists do not talk of UFOs and do not talk of Lovecraft because apparently it's okay talking about demons and angels, but as soon as you start talking about, you give them different names, it becomes, oh no, you don't do that. It's also important to notice that when we look at the painting of Lam, which I don't know if you will be able to put it on screen or just if you just Google.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, you just Google it or click on the show.
I can put it up when I'm doing it. Anyway, yeah.
If you look at it, it also really, if you look very good at it, it also seems something else. It seems like a phallus entering an anus. It also looks like that, right? And it was that kind of magical, that kind of sexual intercourse was used in the Amalantra working. So was Crowley just, pulling our legs? Or maybe there's something to be read into it. I think there's something to be read into it, especially when we read is Crowley's final masterpiece, the Book of Thought, which on the surface is a book about tarot. In fact, it is the final understanding of all the system of Thelema. And if you want to have a little bit of insight in this, you should go and read the chapter on the tower. Go and read the chapter on the tower, then look at Lam. Maybe you can have some insight on what they were doing there and who they were calling. I work with Lam extensively. It is a gateway. It is definitely an entity that it's not so much an entity you talk to. It's a vector. It's something that you can conjure and you can transfer your consciousness inside and then use it almost like a spaceship to go somewhere else and, interact with whatever other consciousness is on the other side. Wherever is this other side, by the way, right? It's definitely one of the magical practices that I've been mostly fascinated with most of my life. And it's been part of my magical practice for 20 years now. It's interesting that Crowley never really tells us more. Like we have the diary of the Amalantra working. We don't have any reference of Lam in it. We only have Kenneth Grant words that says, Crowley swear by it, that, gave him and say, this is Lamb, it comes from there. And of course, the timeline is right. The Amaranta working was happening late 1910s. That's when he painted it. He drew it. It's not painting, it's a drawing. And but that's all. It's all about trying to find if there's more to it. I think there's more to it. Plenty of other magicians had the same experiences. So again, if you want to have a little bit of insight, try and read the book on the Tower about and maybe you'll find something.
Bringing it back to Scotland, because it's Scottish Paranormal Podcast, as you know.
Of course.
So Boleskine House.
Oh.
Why was it? Do you reckon the location with Boleskine was quite important for Crowley, or?
So Boleskine House came. I mean, it appeared in Crowley's life by chance. So we're now back into the late 1800s, early 1900s. Okay, early 1900s. And Crowley was still a very keen mountaineer at the time, right? So he would go on vacations and he would go climbing. Mm-hmm. He would go to Foyers a lot for climbing. Okay, apparently there's a lot of mountains there. And I will admit I've been in Boleskine once many years ago, but it was really like a touch and go. And of course I couldn't get in because it was privately owned at the time, still is. They really didn't like any kind of people. So I cannot say I didn't stay in Foyers much, but Crowley apparently used to go to Foyers a lot to climb, and at the same time he was looking for a specific house where he could conduct something called the Abramelin operation. Mm-hmm. The Abramelin operation is almost like the non plus ultra of the magical operations. Pretty much every magician have heard about it. I would say a lot of people that love horror movies have now known about it because a beautiful movie came out some years ago called A Dark Song, mm-hmm. which is the best representation of ceremonial magic ever. Like, it's incredible how good it is. One of my good friends worked in it as in the photography, but she didn't tell me after many years. And then when we discussed it, she told me that the director has an interest in magic. So that's what gets the point. So if you're curious to see what the not so much what the Abramelin operation is, because there's a lot of it takes a lot of shortcuts to show this magical operation. But in general, if you want to see what that would entail, that is secluding yourself in a specific house that has to have some specific rooms, and then you must be alone with no contact with anybody from the outside, and just stick to it for. It says tradition. Crowley thought for 6 months. More modern translation of the grimoire says 18 months. In fact, when I did it for 6 months, and it worked anyway. So maybe the time, it's not so much how much it is, but the fact that you are away from the world for a while, right? And only with magic. And the thing is that he was looking for the best house to do this operation, and so he was climbing in Foyers. And lo and behold, he looks on the other side and he sees this house, which was Boleskine. And Boleskine was apparently like perfect. He had like the oratory, everything was like perfect. So Crowley at the time was a millionaire, as we said before. He goes there, and I'm now reading from Per Durabo, which is the best biography of Crowley, again by Richard Kaczynski. He says that he rang the owner, Mary Rose Burton, and explained his interest. She told him Boleskine was not for sale. He insisted that he must have it and offered her £2,000, twice the market value. She said they had a deal. So, by the way, £2,000 at the time was £85,000 of today's money. Mm-hmm. He got it for nothing because last time the ruins of Boleskine House, because as you all know, it went up in flames twice in recent years. The ruins of Boleskine House were both by the people that then went up to put together the Boleskine House Foundation, which I have a lot of things to say about, but I won't in this podcast. They bought it for something around $500,000 from what I've heard. So £85,000 it's kind of a steal for Boleskine house, right? And so that's why he ended up there. He never thought that Boleskine had anything to do. So there's a lot of these stories you find online. He wanted to get there because he knew there was like a magical fulcrum of power. I mean, of course, it's on Loch Ness, which is a weird place, and I would say any big lake is a weird place because a lake really is a mirror, right? And a mirror really is a portal between dimensions. Like things can come in and out of a mirror. Things can come in and out from the depths of the ocean, depths of a lake. So Loch Ness is also for the monster, right? It's definitely a weird place. But Crowley didn't know it. I mean, I think that the Loch Ness monster was not photographed till way later, anyway, and. He didn't think of it as a place that was magic. It was Boleskine. Boleskine was the perfect house. Mm-hmm. He has all the right rooms, and it was secluded enough for him to go away from the world for 6 months and do this operation. It's interesting to say that he never finished it, right? Because 3 months in or 4 months in, he was called back to London, and he decided that he had enough. Pretty much, he would go. This is also where other legends come around. Like now, all the area now is haunted because Crowley never finished his operation. Mm-hmm. I think that's not the case, right? The operation, you in the traditional grimoire of Abramelin, you pretty much purify yourself for 6 months. At the end of this, or 18 months, in fact, as it says the real translation. At the end of this, you're granted the union and the knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel. You become one with God, okay? And what the angel tells you to do is to bind every demon. And by demons, it's complicated, but let's say they're spirits of the underworld. They're spirits of they're not celestial spirits. They're spirits of what's behind the world, okay? Mm-hmm. The thing is that Crowley never got to that point. Okay, so Crowley never called all the demons to bind them because he never finished it. So in fact, Crowley left when he was, squeaky clean, like a perfect person out of a shower. I don't know, something like that. So the idea that he never finished the operation, and so that's what created that's what cursed Boleskine. There's no magical reasoning behind it, but it's definitely true that's a place where a lot of magic has been done. So it's definitely true that it's the place with a resonance. I also personally think that with the fire, with the recent fires, that magical resonance is gone. In the Book of the Law, it is written something, and again, I'm not quoting verbatim, that there will come a time where your house will burn, but it will stand forever in memory. And that kind of, to me, is a prophecy that came to pass about Boleskine. So does it have any magical importance? I mean, when I've been there outside, you could feel something, but you can feel something pretty much everywhere around Loch Ness, and you can feel something in Edinburgh. You can feel something in the necropolis of Glasgow, a lot of it actually. So it's I would say maybe we shouldn't give Boleskine too much spotlight. That's me.
It's got the interesting thing I found about it as well was before I was talking to Nathan for Penny Royale, and we're talking about the Kentucky anomaly and things like that over there. That there is an anomaly that runs right up through that bit with Boleskine House as well. Okay. No, it's not as big as obviously Kentucky, because that's like a massive anomaly where the basically the gravitational fields and geomagnetic fields and stuff like that. But when you see the one that runs, there's a strip that runs right up through the section where Boleskine is, and that's Boleskine run about the centre of it. I mean, so I found that quite interesting. Plus the fact that as well, as the crow flies, not too far away from there, you've then got like the Cairngorms, and even up there as well, there's like a one of the Theory Society. They've got like a holy mountain up there as well.
Oh yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
And there's a lot of kind
of. I mean, the area itself is really magical. But I personally think it's because of the influence of the lake. Like, we don't know what's inside Loch Ness, and
No.
it's like I believe that we should look inside Loch Ness better, because I mean, we're getting to the point where we do have the technology, right? I would really like to see what's in the depths of that place, because, like I said, like lakes in general have this idea, this liminal space, between the high and the low, the land and the water. I mean, the liminality of it's what makes it powerful magically. Every liminal space is powerful magically. But again, if you tell me that there's also like a massive deposit of quartz, like it's under Somerset, then that's very interesting as well. So, like the places like this tend to have a series of things happening at the same time. But in the case of Bolesky, like I said, Crowley was shocked to find almost like the perfect house. He didn't know anything about it. But then again, it doesn't mean that he wasn't like holidaying in foyers just because he was called there by something else. Like I said, we live in a very complex universe, and there's so many, what we call synchronicities really are all these threads of fate, all these threads of intermingling and intertwining influences that we can never get the full scope of, right? So
nods and winks.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, it's my turn. Yeah. Could you
To go
explain
back to what we were saying before, right? Exactly.
Could you explain to us the difference between the Black and White Lodge? You mentioned it before.
Yeah, I mean, so just a second.
Are you okay for time?
I do have another 20 minutes. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. I think we can actually.
If you need a break or that, it's fine. Just go for a break. If you need a break or anything like that, or
No. I mean,
toilet break or anything.
I think we're good. So the Black and the White Lodge really are two concepts that come. Well, it is one concept really that comes from theosophy, right? And the idea really is that there is this secret group of ascended masters that have been guiding humanity evolution since time immemorial. And for the theosophists, time immemorial was, before the flowed back into a mythical past of Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, these, pre-Diluvian civilizations, which may or may not have existed. I'm very agnostic about it. I kind of think they have, but up until we don't have like scientific evidence, it's just a theory. The problem there is that theosophy really had, they were trying to synthesize all the religions into one, but by doing that, they were really bringing a lot of the baggage from those religions into it, and also this strict dichotomy between the good and evil. Mm-hmm. Like, so there was a good White Lodge of ascended masters who wanted the good for the world, but this good of the world really was pretty much being good Christians in a way, right? Being good and law-abiding members of society. And the Black Lodge would be pretty much the opposite. Like, everything bad you can think, this is the Black Lodge. If we think of Twin Peaks, right? That's in modern times. That's where those concepts came again to prominence. I think that it's interesting to notice how those concepts became popularized by Lynch and Mark Frost, because Mark Frost is the theosophist, right? It's not David Lynch. David Lynch is the transcendental meditation kind of guy, and the person has a very interesting ideas about a lot of things. But the strict theosophist viewpoint comes from Mark Frost, and I don't buy in the existence of these two lodges, right? Like, I never ever found evidence of it, and I'm one who grew up with Twin Peaks. In 1990, I was 12, and at the same time, I was watching Twin Peaks, and I found Crowley for the first time. So it was set up onto this path by from the very beginning. But never once I found like this idea that there is an evil cabal of mystical masters that is counterpoint to a good cabal of mystical masters. I think that everything that becomes a dichotomy between good and evil, light and dark, right and wrong, that's where we kind of lose ourselves into the illusion of this incarnation. We live in, as incarnated being, we are steeped into duality. Even when we talk, right, to ourselves, we are talking, there's a voice inside of us and there's the reception inside of us, right? There's never like full union of communication. I mean, up until you get to some more advanced state of consciousness. The point is that everything else, it's dichotomy. Everything else is polarity. Everything else is me and you, good and bad, from our perspective, light and absence of light. By that I mean literally, like if you turn the light on and the light off, there's different states, right? So I would say that all of this, when all of this is extrapolated to a metaphysical level, we lose ourselves in a way. We kind of lose ourselves in the game. We don't see. We don't like look at the finger, not at the moon. Looking at the moon would be learning to get away from these dichotomies and these polarities entirely, and learning to, in fact, experience them both. And by experiencing them both and not thinking that one is you're not identifying with each, you can then annihilate them. There's one of those holy books of Thelema called Liber Tzadi, Vel Hamus Hermeticum, which means Liber Tzadi, the book of the fish hook, or the hermetic fish hook. And this idea that it's a treatise on initiation, and it is that the fish hook is literally Christ that fishes for initiates, right? Like you say, I will give you. Anyway, let's not go there. Point I'm making is that in this book, it says something in the line that inside you, there's one companion, and that companion is you, but that companion hears the call of two things. It hears the calls of the highest heavens and hears the calls of the deepest hells. And you should experience both, and you should achieve both weddings. Because if you don't, you'll end up thinking that one is you and the other isn't you. Well, in fact, we are both. And so this idea that this metaphysical idea of that the white and the black lodge, it's a delusion. It's an illusion itself. This might not be a very popular opinion for those who have not invested themselves too much into magic. Also because the idea, like we definitely know that that evil exists in the sense that we can see evil deeds being done constantly. I mean, think of, I don't know much of you have seen the horrors coming from Ukraine. I mean, there's no doubt that that is evil, but that's the evil that man do.
Yeah.
Okay, not quote Shakespeare, but I mean that evil is what we do, the acts we do. Once you start transcending humanity, once you start going deeper into magical practices, you realize once you start getting closer to the union with the angel and knowing your true will, you should have at that point balance your good and your evil side, because none of that are real in a metaphysical sense. And so a black lodge and a white lodge cannot really exist. It's a good idea, but to me, it really is a theosophist simplification of the dichotomy of the human experience. On that note, this doesn't mean that there aren't people out there, maybe even experienced magicians, experienced mystics, that aren't evil and they haven't seen this truth of, you know, the non-dual truth of existence, and they might have assembled themselves into a cabal of evil magicians, but they're not like the ascended masters, right? They're not like this metaphysical evil. They're just very much maybe very skilled pieces of shit. But that is my experience with these concepts. In many ways, I would say this is also what Lynch shows you, because I mean, think about what it says about Bob. What is Bob in Twin Peaks? Bob is the evil that man do, right? Like it literally tells you in Twin Peaks and in Twin Peaks: The Return, right? The idea that the Black Lodge, and so Bob and the Garmomboncia, all those ideas. Well, those exist because humans detonate the bomb, and the bomb, creates this instability that forces, the giant, which really isn't at the time part of the White Lodge, is somewhere. At that point, he decided, okay, I need to create the evil that man do because it's there. I have to give it a form. But at the same time, if that exists, I have to counterbalance it. So this is my reading of Twin Peaks. I don't know how we got here, but there we go.
Just from your kind of your own perception of things. So from a paranormal sense, right? You must, from what you've researched, what you've practiced, and what you've lived, basically. I mean, for many years, you must see things through a different set of eyes. For example, when you look at the UEP stuff that's going on now and things like that, or some kind of paranormal things that go on, you know what I mean? So you would probably see it as something totally different or something. Is there anything else? Is there any kind of things like that you could potentially talk about in regards to, let's take for example, the UEP thing that's happening now? I see it as a lot different. I don't see it's just totally nuts and bolts and stuff like that. And you're getting more people these days. They're seeing there's more connection to consciousness to do it than there is to actually to do it a nuts and bolts ET or whatever else. You know what I mean?
So I think that what we are experiencing in these days, we're recording this at the end of 2022. What we are experiencing now, what we've been experiencing for a while, is the fact that everybody is seeing the same things that we always seen, but we have more internet, we are more interconnected, we talk more about it, and we have our phones always with us, so we're always kind of able to record the experience. We didn't have it at the end of the day. What is happening to me is I don't really think that there is like a surge of I don't know, of awakening, or I don't really think that there are more ultra-terrestrials, which is a term that I like to use a lot because I kind of makes sense. I don't think there are more now than there were before. I think we are talking about it more now. Yeah. I also think that the governments always knew all this because it's been with us since forever. Yeah. And all the recent years of disclosure has always been like I don't want to say that it's been like a psyop because it's a very loaded term, but it has been a way that the governments know that they cannot just deny it anymore. Because for the longest term, the governments were just denying everything, because to the point, we all know that, right? Now they know that, again, everybody has their phone. Everybody can talk to everybody on the internet. They cannot control information anymore. I mean, they're trying. I would say Elon Musk trying to tank Twitter. Maybe that's one reason. But that's me being very, very conspiratorial at the moment.
I think that as well.
But the point is that, like at the same time, they cannot control it anymore. So that's how they're like trying to, all this discussion about disclosure is becoming. Again, back to Peter Levenda, I can also tell you that, in what we discussed, and I mean, I had almost 2 hours discussion on my Twitter, on my YouTube channel with him, public. He said that, a lot of people in the CIA, a lot of people in Washington, he knows all of them. He's been working with them for years. A lot of these people are actually really curious and really want to try and discuss it with the world. They didn't want to shut it down, right? Yeah. If you ask me, what is this? Are they aliens? Are they coming from other planets? Are they coming from other universes? Are they coming from other plane of existence? My answer to it is all of this at once and more.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it is. Like, the thing is that every time we have an experience with something that's ultra-terrestrial, that's the other, it could be anything, really, because we are constantly contacted by everything. Like I said at the beginning, we live immersed in a sea of spirit, right? And the spirit from time to time wants to ignore us, most of the times, from time to time wants to talk to us. One thing that one controversial idea that I have, and it's controversial again with Peter, with Lavender, like we don't see eye to eye to this. I don't think that there's ever a bad spirit contacting you. I don't think in bad alien. I don't believe in bad aliens. And so the counterpoint is that, so what about, those that feel threatening? What about those who have experience of abduction? And by the way, I'm pretty sure you know that, but I'm going to repeat it. Like the experience with abductions of the aliens is pretty much the same of the experience of of being abducted by the fairies in the 1700s. It's very similar. Again, I don't think it's the same. It's a similar experience. Mm-hmm. Possibly that's what happens when somebody who's not ready to receive a huge download of information. If you're not ready to that, I don't say you go mad, but you feel it as a violation. You feel it as an abuse. But is it an abuse, or is maybe like the other side just downloaded so much information in you, and your boundaries are not able to receive it? Boom, you explode. Of course, you can say, well, fuck you. Why you're doing this to me? Fine, but I really don't believe in metaphysical evil, as I said before, right? I also believe that whoever is on the other side, and by other side, I really mean different levels of, different vibrational levels of consciousness.
Yeah,
can be higher, can be lower. It doesn't really matter. Well, what's on the other side? Some of them will be very advanced. I tend to believe most of them are way more advanced than us, but not all of them, because as a magician, you can get in touch with spirits like the elementals, which are not as complex as humans. Actually, in fact, you can work with them, and they can do a lot of things for you, because you are on, I wouldn't say on a higher rung of the scale of evolution, but kinda. Okay, terrible analogy. You got the idea. But the thing is that some of them, even if they're more advanced than us, they will be just a little more advanced, but still very much more on an incarnated level, like not on a godlike level. Some of them will godlike level. Some of them will be awakened. Some of them will be, what we would call divinities, gods, goddesses, right? So again, it's such like an infinite spectrum of possibilities that, if you ask me, so what it is for you, all that I can think and all that I cannot think pretty much is there. So my suggestion is, I would say it is learning magic, because magic, what does magic really does at the end of the day? It gives you your own spaceship. It gives you what really magic does, at least in the Western Esoteric Tradition, is the creation of your body of light. Like that, your body of light is not just your defense, but it is your spaceship. It's something that can help you navigate these encounters, navigate these downloads of information. Like again, Michael Bertillot, which is a very important and famous occultist and somebody I studied with directly, he wrote about the good UFO and the bad UFO experience. And he really makes the point that, the magician has the good UFO experience because he has, built their own body of light, built their own ability, their radio as well, the ability to decipher the frequencies correctly. And so if they call something, or if they encounter something, or if something comes to them, they're not scared. They will not feel abducted. They will feel, a good interaction, right? And maybe this is why from time to time you get, those abduction experiences that are not traumatizing, but they're pleasurable. In general, I really believe that one of the problems that we have right now is that we did have 40, 50 years of those governments telling us that they're evil and they're there to kill you. Right? I'm pretty sure that a lot of the things that people still see to these days are man-made, and they're used as to control the population, to instill fear. I think it was Reagan that said that. Was it Reagan or Bush? I don't remember. Like the final war will be the war with something that comes from the outside. Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I don't have any evidence that what comes from the outside want to kill us. Mm-hmm. I feel that in my experience, what comes from the outside is curious. Maybe from time to time it doesn't know anything about etiquette. Maybe from time to time it can be too forceful. maybe it can be too much for the individual. But then again, this is also what happens in the Bible when, what's his name? Moses sees God as a bush of fire, because if God was to reveal himself to Moses in its real form, Moses would just like be blinded forever. See, this message just comes again and again.
I do think sorry, cut you off. Sorry.
No, please.
I do think like the difference between a bad encounter and a good encounter is just fear of the person. I mean, because it's like, you sometimes find you have maybe people who initially had a bad encounter because it was the fear factor at the start of it, and then through time they've learned to maybe experience it a certain way and receive, they'll call it downloads now, and information, and they'll see there's a different side to it. You know what I mean? And it's maybe a case of, you maybe have some researchers looking at it and saying it's just all bad, and some people look at it as it's good, and you get people in the middle camp. But it's maybe just a process that people are going through. You know what I mean?
I would agree with you, absolutely. I agree. I also think that I realize that I might be a little bit too much on the everything is good side, maybe because my experience has always been on the good side. But I'm also like not your average person. I went to look for this all my life, and I went to look for this always prepared, right? There's been a couple of times when I was younger that I just threw myself into things. I got burned, and I was like, okay, I need to get prepared. Like, so every time else, every other time I went to do these things, I had good experiences, right? And I'll tell you, most of the times, it's really way less bombastic than what movies make it to be. But what counts for me, it's the quality of the information. Like, do you get something out of it? Do you learn something out of it? And in my experiences, like, the other wants to talk. Whenever they want to talk with us, they want to give us information, and information we can use, and information that actually, it's always been there in the human history. It's always been there at pivotal moments. So that's it.
So last question from myself is, do you think there's been a shift of change in people's attitude to magic now, rather than in the past when there's maybe things like satanic panic? Do you think nowadays there's a bit more of a positive reaction to magic, or do you think there's this is just maybe, as you said before, maybe goes in cycles?
So I definitely think that, again, thanks to the internet, thanks to the freer flowing of information, we had more curiosity about magic, more ability, especially in recent times, to put together compelling pieces of information about what the magic is, what we do. So in many ways, I remember, the 90s when I started going on. I'm Italian, so I was born and bred in Rome, and in the 90s I was in Rome, connecting with my dial-up on BBSs, right? Like, get off the phone, right? And like mid 90s, I get Netscape, start going, on Barbelith forum, or on Usenet, on alt.magic. There was a lot of discussions going there. I'll tell you, it's always been full of drama, full of flames, full of people like quarreling about everything. But I feel like the granularity of information got better, but the depth of information isn't as good as it used to be. Possibly because in this day and age, right, like we are kind of we've been instructed to consume like bite-sized everything. Like, if a video on YouTube is more than 5 minutes, it's too long. I remember, again, 25 years ago now, oh God, I'm old, reading for hours on very bad screen. You remember, you guys, you were there as well, I suppose. Like, terrible screens, on IRC, there's walls of text, and the depth of information was better, but it wasn't as granular. It wasn't as everywhere as it is right now. The lockdowns years gave magic, on the interest of magic, a huge boost, as I was saying at the beginning, right? A lot of people got interested in that. even before that, there was like yet another witch revival. You know, the first one I remember was when the movie Charmed came out in the 90s. And now in recent years, I mean, it's been more the witch as a feminist icon became a big thing. Of course, along the Me Too movement, along the gender affirming movements, it became like a big point of discussion. All of this, I think it's overall better for the magical milieu. It's also true that we're all moving targets for a possible escalation in that, return of the satanic panic, which it's been there, I would say, since 2015, 2016. And of course, if you think about it, what day is that? Well, what the day where a lot of the world, went right, went authoritarian, went reactionary again. Again, I don't think so far it has been as bad as what people that were there in the 80s tell me. But I can tell you, I have a lot of people, friends in the United States that are, out of the broom closet, as they say, and some of them are, occult influencers, like apparently I am as well. We all hate this term, by the way. Let's say writers, authors, podcasters, YouTubers. Well, in the United States, these people maybe had like shit thrown on their porch, or their book, their bookshops are being assaulted, things like that. It happens. Still, it's not as bad as it was in the 90s. Sorry, in the 80s. But it is out there. It is out there, definitely. I want to be cautiously optimistic against all odds, because really the lockdown years were really good for this community. A lot of people came together. A lot of things kickstarted. Zoom helped massively, and if we're able not to destroy ourselves as a civilization in the next few years, which still out there as a possibility.
You're giving us a few years.
Yeah, exactly. I want to end this on a positive note, right? Like I said, we have to be always on the watch for any reactionary train of thought coming under the spotlight again. And the satanic panic is it, right? It's the most obvious of them. But overall, I think we're still in good shape, and we're nowhere as bad as it was in the 80s. So hopefully we can clink onto that. And I don't know, in the meantime, maybe we can have like full disclosure or whatever that is.
Yep.
Or maybe we can have our friends in the other come to us in even more numbers, because I don't want to say I believe, I know that that's the key for human evolution. That's what's going to happen next. And this is not to say that we humans cannot do things on our own. That is to say that we humans have to remember that we've always been part of something bigger.
Yeah.
And that something bigger is our birthright. And that's what magic is, the birthright of humanity.
Marco, you've been a fantastic guest, and I appreciate the time you spent with us tonight. So if you'd like to, just before, what do you say, bye as well, Mark, and then we'll get Marco, if you want to let us know where people can find yourself, find your obviously podcasting site on Twitter, and obviously your book and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, so people can find me on magic at marcovisconti.org. That is my website. Everything is there, like all the links, all everything is there. Right now, I am in the mid of the first cohort of my new revamped course. It's going to end in December. And so pretty much like, yeah, you can sign up to the community, but there's not much to do at the moment. But yes, feel free to join if you want. And then, I always rerun these courses. So if you join the community, you're going to have a chance to rerun the course when in the next cohort. I'm also putting together a new course on the Thought Tarot. And the idea is that to have like 22 weeks, each week is going to be one major arcana, and we're going to go deep into understanding, all the magical secrets in each card, and how you're going to use it to visit the worlds that are hidden in the card. So, when I say like using your body of light as a spaceship, pretty much that's it, what we're going to do. And the book is coming out on the 14th of February, 2023 for St. Valentine, apparently. So it's going to be your perfect Valentine gift. It's all red. Perfect for St. Valentine. There's also a very boobed Baphomet on the cover. You can already pre-order the book on Amazon. Find my name, Marco Visconti. If you look for Marco Visconti Thelema, you'll get to the book. So that's it, really. It's been a pleasure. I hope I didn't bore you too much with all my rambles.
Not at all.
We covered a lot of ground, but it's been a good one.
Yeah.